Bobby McCulley III was born in 1986 in St. Louis County, Missouri. His childhood was spent in a small but friendly family. The parents, James and Linda McCulley, have always tried to provide their children with everything they need. Bobby had an older sister who played an important role in his life, helping him cope with difficulties and supporting him in his endeavors. The McCully family lived in a cozy house on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by greenery and safe streets where children could play without fear. From an early age, Bobby showed an interest in sports, especially baseball. He spent every free minute at the local playground playing with friends. The coaches noticed his dedication and team spirit, which made him not only a good athlete, but also a leader among his peers. Bobby always tried to be the first, whether it was on the playground or at school, recalled one of his friends. This stubborn character and desire to be the best accompanied him throughout his life. Besides sports, Bobby was interested in mechanics. In high school, he often spent time in the garage with his father, helping him fix his car. These moments not only brought them closer, but also instilled in Bobby the ability to work with his hands, which later came in handy in his career. His father, James, was strict but fair and taught his son to value work, be honest, and respect others. These values are deeply ingrained in Bobby and have become part of his personality. After graduating from high school, Bobby decided to continue his education at a local college, choosing a major in business administration. His dream of starting his own business motivated him to study and develop. He was serious and focused, rarely skipped classes, and tried to stand out among the students. It was in college that his life changed. At one of his student parties, he met Roseanne Johnson, a bright and motivated girl studying psychology. Their acquaintance began with a small conversation about music and sports, which developed into a long and sincere friendship. Roseanne stood out for her listening and supportive skills, and Bobby was immediately captivated by her kind nature. Their friendship soon developed into a romantic relationship. They often walked around the campus, discussing their dreams and plans for the future. Bobby told Roseanne about his dream of opening an auto repair shop, and she shared her goals: to work with children and help them cope with difficulties. Their communication was easy and inspiring, and soon they realized that they wanted to build a future together. In 2007, Bobby and Roseanne got married. Their wedding was small but very warm. Only the closest friends and relatives were invited to the ceremony. The couple decided to save on large-scale celebrations in order to invest in the furnishing of their first home. This house, small but cozy, became a symbol of their beginning together. The first year of their marriage was spent in labors and plans. Bobby got a job at a construction company, where he quickly gained the respect of his superiors for his responsibility and hard work. He dreamed of climbing the career ladder to ensure a stable future for his family. Roseanne began working as a school psychologist, helping children cope with life's difficulties. Her work brought her great satisfaction, and she often shared with Bobby stories about the children she was able to help. In 2008, their first child was born, a son, Caden Johnson. Bobby was thrilled to be a father figure. He spent a lot of time with his son, teaching him how to throw a ball, read, and understand cars. Caden became the center of their world, and his parents tried to give him the best. In 2015, the McCully family was joined by another member. A daughter, Kaylee Brooks, was born. Roseanne said that Kaylee's birth was a real gift for them. The girl grew up cheerful and energetic, showing interest in drawing and music from an early age. Her drawings decorated the walls of their house, and Roseanne was always proud of her creative achievements. In 2020, Bobby and Roseanne had their third daughter. Her appearance was a real happiness for the whole family. The older brother and sister adored the younger sister, and the parents gave her all their attention. The one-year-old baby was surrounded by love and care. Her laughter filled the house with joy. The McCully family looked happy and united. On weekends, they had picnics, went outdoors, or attended sports events. Bobby often took Caden to baseball games, sharing with him his passion for the sport. Kaylee loved to arrange concerts at home, and the whole family enthusiastically applauded her improvisations. Neighbors and friends said that the McCulleys were an example of a close-knit family. Their house was always open to guests, and Rosanna was famous for her culinary talents. Bobby, in turn, always helped the neighbors with car repairs or house repairs, for which he was highly respected. Bobby and Roseanne had big plans. They dreamed of moving to a more spacious house where each child would have their own room. Bobby was planning to open his own car repair shop, and Roseanne wanted to continue her studies and develop a career as a psychologist. Together, they dreamed of traveling with children, wanting to show them the world and give them more opportunities. The McCully family lived a full and fulfilling life. They not only enjoyed the moments they spent together, but also actively worked to create a better future for their children. The morning of March 5th, 2021 in St. Louis County, Missouri began with an alarm call received at the local police station. The caller reported that screams and gunshots could be heard in the house at 4800 block of Lock Haven. These words caused the police to react immediately, sending patrol cars to the designated location. Upon arrival at the scene, the officers noticed the alarming signs. The front door was ajar, which in itself looked unusual for this area, where residents always monitored security. Children's toys lay scattered on the porch steps, and an oppressive silence reigned inside the house. The police entered cautiously, not knowing what they were going to face. Upon entering the house, the officers immediately smelled the smell of gunpowder, which was still in the air. The oppressive atmosphere was intensified by the disorder that reigned in the room. Overturned furniture, broken photo frames on the floor, toys scattered throughout the room. All this indicated that there had been a struggle in the house.
34-year-old Roseanne McCully, her 13-year-old son Caden, and daughter Kaylee, just 6 years old, all three murdered by Bobby McCully.
In the living room, on the carpet, lay the bodies of Roseanne McCully, her 13-year-old son Caden Johnson, and 6-year-old daughter Kaylee Brooks. Roseanne, judging by her posture, was trying to protect the children. Her son's hand was covering her body, and a grimace of horror froze on her face. Kaylee, the youngest of the victims, was lying a little to the side, clutching a teddy bear in her hands. This scene shocked even the most experienced officers. The officers immediately called in criminologists and detectives to begin work at the crime scene. The house was cordoned off, and the surrounding area was carefully checked for possible evidence. Meanwhile, new patrol cars were arriving to ensure the security of the area. While the criminologists recorded every detail inside the house, the officers began to interview the neighbors. Several people said they heard loud screams coming from the house early in the morning, but no one was able to determine the exact time. One of the neighbors, an elderly man who lived across the street, said he saw a man who looked like Bobby McCully enter the house around midnight. However, this fact needed to be confirmed. Some residents of the area noted that Bobby and Roseanne sometimes quarreled, and noise from their house was not uncommon. But no one could have imagined that these disputes could escalate into something so terrible. A woman living next door said she saw Roseanne playing with the children in the yard the night before, and everything looked as usual. She seemed happy, nothing foreshadowed trouble, she said, wiping away tears. Criminologists began a thorough examination of the house. Traces of violence and disorder indicated that there had been a struggle in the house before the tragedy. Shell casings were found on the living room floor, which the criminologists carefully collected for analysis. There were traces of blood on the walls and furniture, and fingerprints that could belong to the perpetrator remained on some surfaces. Apparently, the perpetrator used a gun to shoot her and the children. The experts noted that all the shots were fired at close range, which indicated the coolness and premeditation of the actions. Criminologists also noted that there were no signs of forced entry in the house, which could mean that the perpetrator had access to the house, or it was open to him voluntarily. During the inspection of the house, the officers found that the 1-year-old daughter was missing from the list of family members. Her crib was empty, and her things were neatly stacked in place. This fact caused the police additional concern. The missing child could mean that he was either a victim of abduction or was with the perpetrator. The police immediately sounded the alarm and launched a search operation. The picture of horror was complemented by the fact that no signs were found in the house that the child could be safe. Everything indicated that the perpetrator had acted with a clear plan and intention to escape with the baby. The police who arrived at the scene were shocked by the scale of violence and senseless brutality. Even the most experienced officers, who had seen many tragic cases, admitted that this crime had left an indelible impression on them. "It's one of those scenes that stays with you forever," one of the detectives said. Neighbors and family friends gathered near the scene couldn't believe what was happening. For them, the McCully family has always been an example of love and care. No one could understand how such a terrible event could happen in their quiet neighborhood. "They were such a close-knit family. We never noticed anything strange," one of the neighbors recalled. The first actions of the police included notifying all patrol crews about the search for Bobby and his car, a silver Chevrolet Malibu. The officers knew that the car could be a key piece of evidence, since it was with its help that Bobby could escape. A description of the car, including the license plates, was distributed so that any officer who noticed the car could immediately report it. At the same time, the AMBER alert system was activated, warning about the abduction of a child. This system made it possible to inform residents of the district and surrounding areas that a man who may be armed and dangerous is wanted, and a 1-year-old girl is with him. The police immediately began interviewing Bobby's relatives and friends, trying to get any information about possible places where he could be hiding. His parents and older sister were among the first to be questioned. According to relatives, Bobby has been acting withdrawn lately and has not shared his plans. However, they mentioned that he had friends outside the county who could provide him with shelter. Some of Bobby's friends reported that he often talked about his desire to start over elsewhere. This led the police to believe that he might try to leave the state. Investigators have requested the help of law enforcement agencies in neighboring counties and states to block his potential escape routes. A few hours after the start of the search, the police received important information from a witness. The man reported that he saw a car matching the description of a Chevrolet Malibu moving at high speed along one of the highways of the district. This call was the first concrete lead that allowed the police to focus their efforts in a specific area. Patrol crews were immediately dispatched to the area. However, by the time the officers arrived, the car had already disappeared, leaving the police perplexed. However, the witnesses indicated the direction in which the car was moving, which made it possible to expand the search area. In parallel with the search on Earth, detectives began working with digital data. An emergency investigation was conducted to find out the location of Bobby's phone. This work yielded the first results. The last signal of his phone was recorded on the southwestern outskirts of the district. However, shortly after that, the phone was disconnected, which made further search much more difficult. In addition, investigators checked Bobby's bank accounts. They found out that a few days before the tragedy, he'd withdrawn a large sum of cash. This indicated that his actions could have been planned in advance, and he was trying to avoid detection by refusing to use electronic means of payment. Surveillance camera footage became another important line of investigation. There were several gas stations in the area where, according to the witness, Bobby's car was seen. The police have requested access to their records to try to track his movements. On one of the cameras, a car similar to a Chevrolet Malibu was recorded passing by a gas station around 6 a.m. Despite the imperfect quality of the recording, the police confidently identified the car. This made it possible to narrow down the search area and give investigators new hope for success. Police crews, along with helicopters and additional patrols, began combing the area where the car was spotted. At the same time, detectives continued to analyze Bobby's connections. The addresses of his friends and colleagues who could provide him with shelter were checked. One of Bobby's friends, questioned by detectives, recalled that Bobby had previously mentioned an abandoned house in the countryside that he had visited a few years ago. This information gave the police a new possible route to check. The tension grew with each passing hour. The disappearance of the child and Bobby's actions caused increasing concern among the public and law enforcement agencies. the AMBER alert continued to work, and residents of the district actively reported all suspicious sightings to the police. However, many of them turned out to be false, which only increased the pressure on the investigators. The detectives knew that time was playing against them. A psychologist who advises the police in such cases suggested that Bobby may be under stress, which makes his behavior even more unpredictable. This has prompted law enforcement agencies to speed up coordination between various units and neighboring states. The breakthrough came when the police received another message from a witness. A man driving along a rural road noticed a car parked in a dense forest. What caught his attention was that the car looked abandoned, and there were no people around it. The witness described the car, and it matched Bobby's Chevrolet Malibu. Upon arrival, the officers carefully examined the car from the outside. It was locked, and the windows were fogged up, making it difficult to see inside. The car looked untouched, and there was nothing to indicate a recent struggle or the presence of other people nearby. Despite this, the tension in the air was palpable. Every officer understood that there could be anything inside, either footprints that would help in the investigation or something more tragic. The officers cautiously approached the car, realizing the possible danger. One of them tapped on the glass, but there was no reaction. Deciding to act quickly, they smashed the side window to gain access inside. The silence that followed the sound seemed deafening.
Police then found Bobby dead in a car where he took his own life.
After opening the car, the officers immediately noticed the figure behind the wheel. Bobby McCully was sitting in the driver's seat, with no signs of life. Upon examination, a gunshot wound was found, and there was a pistol on the floor next to it. According to investigators, this weapon could have been used both in tragic events involving family members and in what happened to him. According to the condition of the body, experts later determined that Bobby committed suicide shortly after he fled the scene of the crime. Apparently, realizing that there was no turning back, he decided to take his own life. The investigators noted that there were no notes or other direct indications of his motives in the car. The only thing that could be assumed from what he saw was the desperation that pushed him to take this step. The condition of the car also confirmed that Bobby had spent considerable time here, perhaps reflecting on his actions before the final step. The temperature in the cabin was elevated, indicating a lack of ventilation for a long time. But the most important discovery was that Bobby and Roseanne's 1-year-old daughter was in the back seat of the car. She was strapped into a child safety seat, which ensured her safety during the entire time she was in the car. When officers found the child, she looked scared and dehydrated, but fortunately had no visible injuries.
Recently, he filed for divorce. They had a 1-year-old daughter together. After killing the other,
The little girl, who had spent some of the most difficult and uncertain hours of her life in the car, quietly watched what was happening, as if realizing the gravity of the situation. The police immediately called for medical help and handed it over to the doctors, who arrived. The child was taken to a nearby hospital for a health assessment, after which she was handed over to relatives who could take care of her. Later, doctors confirmed that the girl was in relatively good physical condition, despite the stress she might have been going through. Doctors and social workers noted that due to the fact that she was strapped into a seat and was in the car and not on the street, she managed to avoid serious consequences. After completing the active phase of the investigation and the discovery of Bobby McCully's body, the police began to analyze possible motives that could lead to such a terrible tragedy. One of the key versions was the discord in the relationship between Bobby and Roseanne, caused by the filing for divorce. At the beginning of 2021, Roseanne decided to take an important step, filing for divorce. According to her friends, she hoped to start a new chapter of her life by focusing on her children and her own career. However, this step was the trigger for Bobby. For Bobby, the divorce meant the loss of his family, which, despite all the problems, he considered his main achievement. Colleagues and friends noted that in the last weeks before the tragedy, he looked depressed and withdrawn. One of his friends recalled, "Bobby said he couldn't imagine life without a family. He couldn't accept the idea that Roseanne wanted to leave." Psychologists who advised the police suggested that Bobby might have developed emotional instability amid the stress of a possible divorce. Losing control of the situation he was used to could cause him to feel hopeless. In addition, a possible separation from his children posed a threat to his self-esteem. Bobby, according to friends, has always been proud of his role as a father. The thought that he would no longer be able to see his children every day probably increased his inner tension. Another aspect that could have influenced Bobby's actions was pathological jealousy. According to his family, Bobby was a man who couldn't stand it when his decisions were questioned. Roseanne's friends said that after filing for divorce, Bobby came to their house several times without warning to talk to Roseanne. She noted that Rosanna felt increasingly vulnerable and even considered the possibility of applying for a protective order. These episodes show that Bobby couldn't come to terms with the loss of Roseanne. He saw her decision as a threat to his identity and the status of the head of the family, which could be one of the factors that pushed him to violent actions. Financial problems could have played an equally important role. A divorce could significantly worsen Bobby's financial situation, as he would probably have to pay alimony and provide for 3 children. In addition, the divorce could have damaged his reputation in the eyes of friends and colleagues, for whom he has always been an example of a caring father. Neighbors noted that Bobby was proud of his status as a family man. The loss of this status could become an additional source of stress and a sense of defeat for him. Experts on domestic violence point out that in such cases, it is the filing for divorce that often becomes the last straw for emotionally unstable partners. For them, this is not just a legal action, but a symbolic end to a relationship that they can perceive as part of their identity. In Bobby's case, the situation was probably exacerbated by his belief that he had lost control of his life. The realization that his family was destroyed could have caused him to feel rage and despair, which he directed at his loved ones. The news of the tragedy shocked residents of St. Louis County. The McCully family, which was once considered a model of harmony and love, has become the victim of one of the most brutal crimes that have ever occurred in the area. Local residents have organized a spontaneous memorial near the family's house, bringing flowers, toys, and candles. Notes were left on the fence of the house expressing condolences and support to the remaining relatives. "This event has shocked us all," said one of the neighbors. "We never thought that something like this could happen in our quiet community." Many residents noted that the tragedy was a reminder to them of the need to pay attention to the warning signs in the relationships of others. Memorial days were organized at the schools attended by Caden and Kaylee. Teachers and students remembered the dead children as kind, talented, and cheerful. Caden was a real leader, always helping the younger ones, and Kaylee was the most creative student in our class, their teacher recalled. In memory of them, foundations have been set up in schools to support initiatives to prevent domestic violence. The tragedy attracted the attention of the media and sparked a heated public discussion. Many people have discussed how such tragedies can be prevented. Domestic violence and emotional abuse in marriage have become a major topic in local and national news. Experts have noted that filing for divorce often becomes a dangerous moment for women in toxic or abusive relationships. "We need to strengthen protection measures for women who are considering divorce," said a local domestic violence lawyer. Such cases show that society and the legal system must be prepared to protect the vulnerable. As a result of the tragedy, local organizations have launched campaigns aimed at raising awareness of the signs of dangerous behavior and providing resources to those in need of help. The police officially closed the case after all the details of the incident were confirmed. The experts concluded that Bobby McCully acted alone and planned his actions in advance. The crime weapon found in the car was registered in his name, and all the evidence gathered, witness statements, camera recordings, and financial information, confirmed that he was fully responsible for what happened. However, law enforcement agencies have acknowledged that this tragedy has revealed important gaps in working with families in crisis. The police report made recommendations to strengthen work with victims of domestic violence, as well as improve coordination between social services and law enforcement agencies. Bobby and Roseanne's 1-year-old daughter, miraculously unharmed, was placed under the care of Roseanne's relatives. The relatives decided not to discuss the incident in public, focusing on ensuring that the girl has a stable and secure future. "She's too young to understand what happened. We will do everything to surround her with love and care," said one of the child's aunts. The story of the McCully family remained in the memory of local residents as one of the darkest events in the history of the district, but it also became a reminder of how important it is to notice alarms in time, help those in need, and protect those who cannot protect themselves. The tragedy of the McCully family has become a lesson for the whole society. She stressed how important it is to provide timely assistance to victims of domestic violence and to be aware of the risks associated with emotional instability. The local community and law enforcement agencies continued their efforts to prevent such incidents so that such horrors would never happen again. Although the case is officially closed, the memory of Roseanne, Caden, and Kaylee continues to live in the hearts of those who knew and loved them. Local initiatives, foundations, and events in their honor remind us of the importance of fighting for the safety and protection of the most vulnerable members of society.